How many chances are too many chances? A lot of people believe that everyone in this world deserves a second chance. But what if that second chance is because they say committed a murder? Do you believe that the charge of murder is a charge that people should be able to walk freely? It's a debate that's been going on for years and years, and it's probably not going to end anytime soon. But if you're on the side of the debate that says that people that do commit murder deserve a second chance, well, listen to this next story, and it might change your mind. January 4th, 1991. The world would make way for Jeronta Brown. Jeronta was raised in the state of Georgia, where he would attend McNair Senior High School, as well as Cedar Grove High School. Jeronta is described as a person who was loving, caring, put others before himself. As fate would have it, Jeronta Brown would cross paths with a single mother, a girl who went by the name of Briana Brooks. The world would make way for Briana on September 18th of 1992. Briana is described as a person with a cheerful personality, a friendly person, someone that you could count on. She was also driven at life. At the age of 5, she already knew what she wanted to be in life. She was striving to be a full-time pediatrician. Jeronta Brown and Briana Brooks would meet, and they would quickly fall in love. It was just a family of 3 at that point. It was Jeronta, Briana, and her son Eric. But life had other plans. Shortly after meeting one another and dating for a while, they would find out that they were pregnant with their first child. A new addition would be made to the family, a baby girl who goes by the name of Kylie. Months after Kylie's birth, the family would find out that they were pregnant once again. The year is 2014. Jeronta Brown is 23 years old, and Briana Brooks would be 21 at the time. They had 2 children, and one on the way. Times were a little rough, so they were staying with Jeronta's stepfather and his mother. Jeronta would be holding down a steady job working at FedEx, but he had dreams of doing bigger things. But their dreams and aspirations would never be reached. Things were soon to transpire that would alter their lives and everyone around them. August 29th, 2014. Jeronta and his then girlfriend Briana would be up late night. The kids were resting, so they decided to go out and get a bite to eat. Just a late night fast food run. But this small and normal gesture would turn out to be tragic, because they would never return home that night. Unbeknownst to Jeronta's stepfather and his mother, when they left out that night, that would be the last time they would ever be seen. August 30th, 2014. At approximately 6 a.m., police would be dispatched to the Bankhead area of Atlanta. Upon arriving on the scene, the detectives would find a male and a female. Both of them were face down in the ground, with their hands cuffed behind their backs. Both victims had experienced gunshot wounds. Upon checking for signs for life, they would come to find that the male was deceased, but the female was still alive. But not only was she alive, she was pregnant as well. So the authorities contact EMS and have her immediately rushed to the hospital. Shortly after, they would be identified as 23-year-old Jeronta Brown and 21-year-old Briana Brooks. After identifying the victims, their first step would be to go to the home that they shared with Jeronta's stepfather and his mother, and they would question them. Unbeknownst to the authorities, the stepfather and his mother had already had a run-in with the law that night because they had to call the police themselves. Around 12:14 a.m., Jeronta's stepfather would place a call to the DeKalb County Police. He says that there were 2 masked men dressed up like police beating on his door. When this occurred, the stepfather knew that they weren't the authorities, so he chose not to answer the door, and him and his wife immediately called the police. And that's when the strangers left. He says shortly after these strangers left, they started to receive phone calls demanding money, a ransom for his stepson and his girlfriend. After receiving this information, the authorities would have to break the hard news. After breaking the news that their son had passed away and Briana was in the hospital fighting for her life, they would ask if they had any enemies. But his stepfather and mother couldn't think of one because Jeronta wasn't in the streets. He was just a hard-working, clean-cut guy trying to provide for his family. Briana didn't have any as well. In fact, no one had a bad thing to say about either one of them. So the police would quickly turn the attention to the stepfather, and they would ask him, is there anyone who might be after you? Because at this point, it looked like the stepfather and the mother might be the actual targets, because after all, they were receiving phone calls demanding money for their safe return. Jeronta's stepfather then tells the police that he had recently came into some money, and he got an insurance payout, but he had spent all of the money. And if someone was after that money, he wouldn't know who. With no leads at their disposal, the detectives decide to do the only thing that they can do, and that's to take down the number in which the people were calling from, demanding a ransom. But when they trace the number, they find out that the number belongs to a burner phone, and there was no registered owner. The detectives then decide to subpoena the phone records, but that will take days, so they do the only thing they can do, and that's turn to the media in hopes to generate new leads. A few days later, they receive the phone call records, and since they don't have a name, the only option they have is searching through the numbers and seeing who they contacted frequently. And that method would pay off. After contacting the frequently called number, a woman would pick up the phone who goes by the name of Rhonda Jones. The detectives would question her about who owns the number, and she gives them a name, kind of. She says that the guy who owns the number simply goes by the nickname E, but she doesn't know his real name. But she does offer another lead. She says that she met this guy through one of her friends, a girl who goes by the name of Nikki. And she even offers a contact number to contact Nikki. So the police do just that. Upon answering the phone, Nikki would tell the detectives that she knew this guy E and that she had met him on a dating site, but she doesn't know his real name either. So the detectives cut the call short, and they ask her to come in for an interview, in which she agrees. Nikki would in fact come down to the police station for that interview. But while they were waiting on her to come down, they would receive a call from the hospital, letting them know that Briana Brooks had passed away. On September 3rd of 2014, at approximately 6:16 p.m., Briana Brooks' doctor would declare her brain dead, and she would be removed from life support. This information would officially turn this case into a double homicide. Days after Briana is pronounced dead, Nikki would show up for this interview. Upon arriving to the police station, the detectives would notice that she had a black eye, and they would question her about it. And she would say that she was robbed the night prior, but it had nothing to do with this case. So they moved forward with the questions. But Nikki maintains her story. She only knows this guy by E, and she doesn't know his real name. So the police would ask her to show them the dating site in which she met him from, and she agrees to do this. But when they go to the dating site, the guy's picture is removed, and the only thing visible on the profile is his birthday. So the detectives decide to cross-reference his birthday inside of their system and see if they get a match. in which they do. So they show this picture to Briana and ask her, "Is this E? Is this the guy that you've been talking to?" And she says yes. But there's one problem. The picture of the guy that she's claiming is E is a guy who was already locked up, and he's been in custody for the last year. So the detectives knew immediately that she wasn't being truthful. After pressing her on the issue further, she maintains her story. She doesn't know E, and she knows nothing about the murder of Jeronta and Briana. So without any physical evidence, they have to let her go. She leaves the police station, and the police are back at square one. So the police once again turn to the media, but this time they provide an incentive, a reward for any information leading to the capture of these suspects. Shortly after announcing the reward, the police would receive a tip. A girl would call in claiming to have knowledge of what actually transpired. She says that she knows a guy who received an odd phone call, a phone call that is directly linked to the kidnapping. So the police go and check this guy out, and when they ask him about the phone call that he received, he says he did receive one. It turns out that one of the suspects actually called someone by accident while they were conducting the kidnapping, and they actually left a voicemail. So the police question the guy and ask him if he still has this voicemail, and he does. So then they ask him, "Do you know who that is?" And he says, "Yes, that's my nephew, a guy who goes by the name of Andre Gay." Then they press him further about the phone number in which they called from, but he says that that's not his nephew's number, but that number belongs to his nephew's friend, a guy who goes by the name of Richard Wilson. But along with this accidental voicemail was the voice of three people. Not only were there two men, but they heard the voice of a woman, and the woman sounded just like Rhonda Jones. So they call Rhonda back down for another interview. But Rhonda maintains the same story that she told them before. She only knows one guy by the name of E, and she knows nothing about the murder of Briana and Jeronta. Even after they confront her about her voice being on the voicemail, she admits that yes, that's her on the voicemail, but she still doesn't know anything. She leaves the police office, and once again, the police are forced to try and generate new leads. They have two suspects, Andre Gay and Richard Wilson, but their whereabouts at this point are unknown, and the only link to them is Nikki and Rhonda Jones. The police were beginning to lose hope that anyone was going to tell the truth, but then something miraculous happens. On September 22nd of 2014, Rhonda Jones would return to the police station, but this time she had a lawyer. She would tell the detectives that she was willing to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, but she wanted immunity, which means she can't be prosecuted in this case. The detectives agree, and they give her that immunity, and then she tells it all. She says that she knew Andre from back in the day. They used to date, and Andre had recently gotten out of prison, and they reconnected. She says that days before the kidnapping occurred, that her, Andre, Richard Wilson, and Nikki were all hanging out at her house, and that's when Andre says that he has a lick. If you're not familiar with what a lick is, it basically means that he knows where some money is at, and he's going to get it. Somewhere down the line of the planning, Nikki said something that made Andre mad. He then punched her in the face, and that's why she had a black eye. They calmed down, and then they continued to plan this kidnapping. They then put the plan into motion. On the night of August 29th of 2014, they would catch Jeronta Brown and Briana Brooks returning home after grabbing their food. They then kidnapped them. They then placed both Briana and Jeronta inside of a van. After placing them inside of the van, they would drive to the back of Rhonda's apartments, where they would then begin to make ransom calls, demanding $150,000 from Jeronta's stepfather and his mother. She then says that after they made enough calls, the guys were visibly getting upset. Richard Wilson was very upset. So after they figured out that they weren't getting the money, they decided to drive Jeronta and Briana to a secluded area in Bankhead. When they arrive on the scene, Richard Wilson then takes both Briana and Jeronta out of the van, places them on the ground, and then he shoots them both. Richard then gets back inside of the van in which Rhonda and Andre are sitting in, and they drive away. Later on that scene, Jeronta Brown would be pronounced dead, and Briana Brooks would be rushed to the hospital, 7 months pregnant. Briana would then manage to hang on just long enough to give birth to her second daughter. And after giving birth, shortly after, she would be pronounced dead.
I gave my heart to a stranger. Father, forgive me for it, but I don't want it back. If this pain is what it means to have it, then I'd rather be without it. Gave away my heart to a stranger.
This is really going to break your heart. A Decatur woman who recently gave birth on life support following a double shooting. It happened over the weekend. Kidnappers took the woman and her fiancé, Jeronta Brown, as hostages, demanded $150,000 from their families. They shot and killed the man. The woman was also shot. She's critically wounded. She gave birth at 7 months. The baby is expected to be okay. A $15,000 reward is being offered for more information. If you can help, you're asked to call Crime Stoppers, that number on your screen right there, 404-577-TIPS.
In the end, Andre Gay and Richard Wilson would decline to have a trial. They would both show up and plead guilty, leaving all the other questions in everyone's mind unanswered. At the beginning of this video, I asked you all, do you believe that convicted murderers deserve a second chance? In 1991, Richard Wilson would plead guilty to manslaughter and robbery, and he would later be released on parole. In 1990, Andre Gay would be convicted for 2 murders. He murdered a mother and her child when he was only 16 years old, and he was later released. But that's not it. Andre is also connected to another unsolved murder, and he was only out 8 months on parole from the first 2 murders before he murdered again. What happened to Jeronta Brown and Briana Brooks was senseless, and neither of them should have been walking the streets. But that's my opinion. What's yours? Rest in peace, Jeronta Brown and Briana Brooks. Thank you for being a light for others.